Poor little girl with a baby in her arms begs a young billionaire to adopt her little brother. What he does is unbelievable. Thursday afternoon started like any other for Silas Martinez. He left the office at 3:30, tie already loosened, thinking about the following week's meeting with the Japanese investors. The September sun beat down on the streets of Chicago, and he decided to walk to the parking garage instead of calling his driver. The air was cooler than it had been in recent days, a light breeze coming in from the lake. 2 blocks later, he stopped at the traffic light on Michigan Avenue. That's when she appeared. A little girl with dark brown hair and big almond-shaped eyes. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She was carrying a baby in her arms that she could barely support. The girl was too small for that weight, but she held her little brother with a determination that caught his attention. Silas looked around, searching for a responsible adult. Nothing. Just the normal city bustle, hurried pedestrians, honking cars, the constant noise of downtown. The girl approached him with hesitant steps, as if unsure whether she should bother him. "Mister." Her voice came out softly, almost a whisper. "Excuse me, mister." Silas looked down. Her clothes were dirty and torn in places, her messy hair stuck to her sweaty face. The baby in her arms was whimpering quietly, as if he didn't have the strength to cry any louder. They both looked exhausted. "Please." She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Adopt my little brother. He cries from hunger every day." The words hit Silas like a punch to the gut. He stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, not knowing what to say. People passed by them. No one stopped. No one seemed to notice. Silas swallowed hard. "Where are your parents?" "Mommy left a long time ago." The girl shook her head. She said she was coming back, but she didn't. The baby made a weak noise. Tessa adjusted him better in her arms, even while trembling with the effort. "That your father?" "I never had a father." She said it simply, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. She adjusted the baby better in her arms, trying to hide her fatigue. Silas felt a tightness in his chest that he couldn't explain. He looked around again, hoping someone would appear, that this was all a misunderstanding or maybe a prank. But there was no one. Just him, the little girl, and the baby who continued to make weak noises. "Look, He started to speak, but didn't know how to finish. "You need to find the police or social services." "I already tried," Tessa said, and for the first time she looked directly into his eyes. "They want to separate us. But I promised Mommy I would take care of Theo." Theo, the baby, had a name. "How long have you two been like this?" "I don't know. A long time." Silas ran a hand through his hair. This couldn't be happening. He had an organized, predictable life. Work, home, meetings, business trips. There was no room for this. "Listen, He took a step back. "I can't help you. There are proper places for this, you understand, people who know how to deal with children." Tessa said nothing. She just stared at him with those enormous brown eyes. The baby whimpered louder, and she began to rock him gently. "Okay," she murmured. "Sorry to bother you." Silas turned his back and kept walking. Each step felt too heavy. He got to his car, turned on the air conditioning, and put on the classical music he always listened to. But he couldn't get the image of the girl out of his head. The traffic was jammed. He sat there, stuck in the middle of the street, trying to focus on his phone's emails. But her words echoed. "He cries from hunger every day." "Not my problem," he said aloud to the closed car window, but he knew he was lying. The 5 o'clock meeting was a disaster. Silas couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about the girl, the baby, where they would be sleeping that night. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but he made up an excuse about a headache. He left the office early and drove straight home. The mansion in Lincoln Park was silent as always. Automatic lights turned on as he entered. The sound system played the jazz playlist he had programmed. Everything perfect, everything in its place. But the silence was unsettling. Silas loosened his tie, poured himself a whiskey, and sat in the leather armchair in the living room. The house had 3 floors, 6 bedrooms, a home theater, a pool, enough space for a whole family. But he had lived alone for 5 years. He tried to work a little, to review the week's reports. It didn't work. The words blurred on the computer screen. He thought about calling someone, but his social life was practically non-existent. After the engagement with Rebecca ended, he had isolated himself. Work, home, work, home. That was it. "Adopt my little brother." The girl's voice returned, as clear as if she were there in the room with him. Silas stood up, went to the window. Down below, the street was empty. Parked cars, lit lampposts, a few illuminated windows in the neighboring buildings. Normal life, normal people in their normal homes. He wasn't normal. He was a 32-year-old man who lived alone in a mansion, worked 12 hours a day, and had no one to call when he needed to talk. When did his life become this? Rebecca had said the same thing the day she ended it. "You live in a bubble, Silas. You don't let anyone in, you don't connect with anything real." At the time, he thought she was being dramatic. Now, 5 years later, alone in a huge house, he was beginning to understand. The girl was real, the baby was real, the hunger was real, and he had simply turned his back. Silas took another sip of whiskey. The liquid burned on its way down but didn't relieve the weight in his chest. He tried to watch television, but all the news seemed to be about families. He tried to read, but he couldn't concentrate on the words. It was almost midnight when he finally went to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. He tossed and turned in bed, thinking about where those children were spending the night. It was cold for the time of year. He had noticed that when he got out of the car. Did they have shelter? Had they eaten anything? Were they scared? The last question made him sit up in bed. Of course they were scared. A 5-year-old girl alone with a baby, without food, without a home, without anyone. How could they not be scared? Silas got up, went to the kitchen, and made some coffee. There was no point in trying to sleep. The image of the girl's eyes wouldn't leave his head. He sat at the kitchen counter until the sun came up, drinking coffee and trying to understand what was happening to him. He had never been an emotional person. He could always separate other people's problems from his own life. That's how it worked in the business world. That's how he had managed to build everything he had. But something that afternoon had changed. Maybe it was the way the girl held the baby, as if he were the most important thing in the world. Maybe it was the simple way she had asked for help, without drama, without tears. Or maybe it was just the fact that, for the first time in years, someone had truly needed him. Not his money, not his company, not his influence. Him. When the sun had fully risen, Silas made a decision he couldn't even explain to himself. He put on casual clothes, something he rarely did on a weekday, and left the house. He drove downtown, to the same place where he had found the children. He didn't know if they would still be there. He didn't know what he would say if they were. He just knew he had to go back. He parked 2 blocks away and walked slowly. The morning was busy, people going to work, stores opening. Everything normal, until he saw the cardboard box. It was leaning against a wall, between a pharmacy and a clothing store. From a distance, it looked like trash. But as he got closer, he saw 2 dark heads sticking out from inside. They were sleeping. Tessa had her arm around the baby, protecting him from the wind. They both looked exhausted, as if they hadn't rested properly. There was a thin blanket over them, torn in a few places. Silas stood there watching. The girl seemed even smaller, sleeping, more fragile. The baby made little noises, as if he were dreaming. How had 2 children ended up like this? Where were the responsible adults? How had society failed so badly that a 5-year-old girl was taking care of a baby on the street all by herself? He had no answers. He only knew he couldn't walk away again. He crouched down near the box. Tessa woke up first, blinking a few times before her eyes focused on him. When she recognized him, she didn't seem surprised, just tired. "Hi," she said softly so as not to wake the baby. "Hi," Silas replied. "Did you sleep well?" She shrugged. "Theo cried a lot last night. I think he's hungry." As if on cue, the baby opened his eyes and began to whimper. Tessa sat up, adjusted him on her lap and began to rock him gently. "Shh, Theo. It's okay, little brother." Silas watched the scene, feeling something strange in his chest. The girl cared for the baby with a naturalness he had never seen. It seemed instinctive, as if it were the most important thing in the world. "How old is Theo?" he asked. 8 months, Tessa answered, still rocking her brother. He already knew how to crawl before we came to the street. Now there's no space. 8 months. The baby was 8 months old and living in a cardboard box. Tessa, Silas hesitated. Do you want to come with me? She stopped rocking the baby and looked directly at him. Where to? To my house. You can take a shower, eat something, and then? The question caught him off guard. And then what? He hadn't thought about that. He hadn't thought about anything beyond the fact that he couldn't leave 2 children sleeping in a box on the street. I don't know, he admitted. But for today, you can stay somewhere safe. Tessa was silent for a moment, looking at her brother on her lap. Theo had stopped crying and was looking at Silas with curiosity. Okay, she said finally, but if you change your mind, you can bring us back. I know how to take care of him. Silas felt a lump in his throat. A 5-year-old girl talking about taking care of a baby, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I'm not going to change my mind, he said, and at that moment, he believed it. He helped Tessa get up, held the blanket while she adjusted Theo in her arms. They walked slowly to the car. Silas opened the back door, helped the girl get in, and placed the baby on her lap. Seatbelt, he said automatically. Tessa fastened the seatbelt, holding Theo carefully. Silas settled into the driver's seat and started the car. In the rearview mirror, he saw the girl's eyes observing everything around them with attention. As he drove through the bustling city streets, his mind wouldn't stop racing. I shouldn't have gotten involved. This isn't my problem. The thoughts repeated like a desperate mantra. He had an organized life, a well-established routine, important commitments. He knew nothing about children, had never wanted kids, had never planned for something like this. But in the back seat, Tessa was humming softly to the baby, a sweet melody he didn't know. And Theo had stopped crying completely. When he looked in the rearview mirror again, he met the girl's brown eyes fixed on him. They weren't the eyes of a normal 5-year-old. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, who had grown up too fast, who had taken on responsibilities she shouldn't have to carry. But there was something else there, a kind of careful, fragile hope, as if she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. As if she still had faith in adults, even after everything. Tessa's gaze from the back seat said the opposite of everything Silas was thinking. It said that maybe this was exactly his problem. It said that maybe he had gotten involved at the right time, in the right way, when it mattered most. It said that maybe his life wasn't as organized as he thought. It said that maybe something essential was missing. And for the first time in 5 long, lonely years, Silas wasn't absolutely sure of anything. The crying started as soon as they entered the house. Theo was screaming as if in pain, a desperate cry that echoed off the mansion's walls. Silas stood frozen in the entryway, holding the keys, not knowing what to do. The sound was deafening. It penetrated his bones, made his head throb. "Is he okay?" he asked, raising his voice over the noise. Tessa rocked her brother in her arms, trying to calm him, but Theo only cried harder. Tears streamed down the baby's red face, and he squirmed in his sister's arms. "He gets like this when he's hungry," Tessa explained, but her voice was tired. "Or when he's scared." Silas ran a hand through his hair. Hunger. Of course. When was the last time they had eaten? He hadn't even thought about it in the car. "Is there something he eats?" he asked, feeling completely lost. "Milk. But..." Tessa hesitated. "We don't have money to buy it." "Right. Milk. Babies drink milk." Silas knew this, in theory. But what kind of milk? How to prepare it? How much to give? He had no idea. Theo kept crying, the sound getting sharper. Silas began to feel desperation rise in his chest. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. He didn't know how to care for children. He had no experience, and he wasn't prepared for this. Maybe, he started, but stopped. Maybe what? Maybe he should take them back to the street. The thought made him feel sick. Tessa sat on the living room floor, settled Theo on her lap, and began to make gentle movements with him. The baby continued to cry, but she didn't seem as desperate as Silas. "Shh, Theo." Her voice was sweet, patient. "I'm here. Mommy will come back. So don't cry, okay?" Silas stopped pacing and watched. Tessa was talking to her brother as if he could understand every word. Her manner was natural, loving, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Look, little brother," she continued, running her small hand through the baby's hair. "We're in a real house now. It has a roof, a warm floor. You'll see. Everything will be okay." Theo's crying subsided a little. It didn't stop, but it became less desperate. "Want me to sing that song you like?" Tessa asked, and began to hum a simple melody. Silas watched, fascinated and disturbed at the same time. The girl was 5 years old, 5. He could barely handle his own anxiety. And she was there, caring for a baby with a patience he had never seen in any adult. "How do you know how to do that?" he asked, unable to hide the admiration in his voice. Tessa glanced at him for a second, then returned her attention to her brother. "I've always taken care of him," she said simply, "almost since he was born. Mommy was always very tired, so I helped. I've always taken care of him. A 5-year-old girl had always taken care of a baby." Silas felt something churn in his stomach. "And your mother? Where is she now?" "I don't know." Tessa shook her head, continuing to hum. "One day she left and never came back. It's been a while now. A while now." As if it were normal, as if mothers just disappeared and 5-year-old daughters took on the responsibility of caring for their baby brothers. Theo stopped crying. Not completely, but the sound diminished to a low whimper. Tessa smiled, relieved. "There, little brother, you're better now, aren't you?" Silas couldn't stop staring. The way she spoke to Theo, how she held him, how she knew exactly what to do. She was too mature, too protective, too loving for a child her age. "Tessa," he said, crouching down next to the two of them, "are you hungry too?" She nodded, but didn't stop rocking her brother. "I'm going to order something for you to eat," Silas said, getting up and grabbing his phone. "And milk for Theo." He called a nearby restaurant for delivery, ordering sandwiches, soup, fruit. Then he called the pharmacy and ordered infant formula. As he spoke on the phone, he watched Tessa caring for her brother. She had laid Theo on the couch and was making funny faces at him. The baby had stopped crying completely and was trying to smile. When he hung up, Silas sat in the armchair across from them. The house was different with them there, not silent like always. It had life. "The food will be here in about 20 minutes, he said. "Thank you," Tessa murmured, not taking her eyes off her brother. They sat in silence for a while. Theo made little noises, as if trying to talk to his sister. Tessa responded to each sound, as if she understood perfectly what he wanted to say. Silas watched it all, trying to process what was happening. A few hours ago, his biggest worry was the meeting with the investors. Now he had 2 children in his living room, one of them a baby crying from hunger. How had he gotten to this point? The food arrived along with the items from the pharmacy. Silas prepared the formula following the instructions on the package, trying not to show that he had no idea what he was doing. Tessa ate slowly, as if not wanting to waste anything. Theo drank the entire bottle and finally seemed satisfied. "He'll sleep now," Tessa said, adjusting her brother on the couch. "When he eats, he gets sleepy. And you, aren't you tired?" "I am," she admitted, "but I have to take care of him." "Tessa," Silas hesitated, "you don't have to do everything by yourself. Not anymore." She looked at him with those serious brown eyes. "But if I don't take care of him, who will?" The question hit Silas like a punch. Who will take care of him? Of course she thought that way. For how long had she been the only person responsible for her brother? "I'll hire someone," he said, deciding on the spot. "A nanny. Someone who understands babies." "A nanny?" Tessa seemed confused. "A person who takes care of children. It's her job. And will she take good care of Theo?" "She will," Silas promised, hoping he was right. Tessa nodded, but didn't seem entirely convinced. She continued to watch her brother sleep, as if not wanting to take her eyes off him for even a second. Silas picked up his laptop and started searching for nanny agencies. He had no idea what to look for, what qualifications were important, how much it cost. Everything was new, scary. But as he typed, something deeply unsettled him. It wasn't just the responsibility of the children or the fear of not knowing how to care for them. It was something deeper, more disturbing. He looked at Tessa, who had rested her head on the arm of the sofa and was almost asleep, but still watching over Theo, 5 years old and already more of a mother than many adult women he knew. These kids have no one else, he murmured to himself, the reality finally hitting with full force. No one, no relatives, no family friends, no support network. Just the two of them, abandoned in the world, depending on each other to survive, and now depending on him. Silas closed the laptop, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't planned for it, wasn't prepared. But there they were, two children who had no one else in the world but him. The idea was terrifying and, at the same time, strangely comforting. Because the truth was, he didn't have anyone either, not really. He had colleagues, acquaintances, people on his schedule, but no one who truly cared, no one who would miss him if he disappeared. Maybe they were all orphans, each in their own way. He looked again at Tessa and Theo sleeping on the sofa in his living room, and for the first time since bringing them home, he didn't feel panic. He felt something he couldn't name, something warm and scary at the same time. He felt that maybe, for the first time in years, he wasn't completely alone. Silas parked in the garage after 3 hours in the most tedious meeting of his life. The Japanese investors had questioned every comma in the report, every projection, every minute detail of the project. He was exhausted and had a headache, but when he opened the front door, he stopped. There was noise. Not the usual silence that always greeted him, that emptiness that echoed through the empty hallways. There was the sound of life coming from the living room. Laughter, a high-pitched voice saying something he couldn't understand, and another, older voice responding patiently. The nanny, Carmen. Her 50-year-old woman he had hired 2 days ago. After interviewing 5 candidates, she seemed to know what she was doing, had good references, experience with babies. But even so, Silas still felt lost when he came home. He took off his tie and walked slowly towards the living room. The sounds became clearer. Tessa laughing at something, Theo making those baby noises he was starting to recognize, Carmen speaking in Spanish. When he reached the entrance of the living room, he stopped again. The house had changed. They weren't big changes, nothing drastic, but everything seemed different. The Persian rug that was always perfectly aligned was crooked, with some toys scattered on top. Colorful blocks, a teddy bear, some children's books he didn't remember buying. Theo was on the floor, on a sort of padded mat, trying to crawl towards a red ball. Tessa was sitting next to him, clapping and encouraging him. "Go, Theo, you can do it." "Get the ball." The baby struggled, moving his little legs, determined to reach the toy. When he finally managed to touch the ball, Tessa celebrated as if he had won an Olympic medal. "You did it. My brother is the smartest in the world." Carmen was folding small clothes on the sofa, smiling at the girl's excitement. When she saw Silas standing in the doorway, she waved. "Good afternoon, Mr. Martinez. How was the meeting?" "It was..." Silas hesitated, still processing the scene. "It was good." Tessa looked at him and smiled. It wasn't the careful smile of the first few days, when she still seemed afraid he would change his mind. It was a genuine, relaxed smile. "Silas, look what Theo did today." She picked up her brother and brought him over to where Silas was standing. Theo looked at him with curiosity, without the constant crying of the first few days. "He crawled," Tessa announced proudly. "Carmen said it's very early for his age, that he's super smart." "Is that so?" Silas looked at the baby, who was trying to grab his tie. Congratulations, Theo." The words came out naturally, without him thinking. When he realized it, he was smiling too. "And I made something for you," Tessa said, suddenly becoming shy. "Want to see?" Before he could answer, she ran towards the kitchen. Silas followed her, curious. Carmen stayed in the living room with Theo, who had gone back to playing with the ball. In the kitchen, Tessa stopped in front of the refrigerator. Silas looked and saw something new there, a drawing held up by a magnet. It was made with crayons, in typical children's colors. 3 stick figures, holding hands, a very small one in the middle, a larger one on one side and an even larger one on the other. Above their heads, she had written in crooked letters, "My family." "This is you." Tessa pointed to the largest figure. "You're smiling." Silas looked closer. Indeed, the figure had a drawn-on smile, 2 dots for eyes and a curve for the mouth. Simple, childish, but undeniably a smile. "And this is me." She pointed to the middle figure. "And this is Theo." "It's very beautiful," Silas said, and he wasn't lying. There was something touching about the drawing, in the way she had placed the 3 of them together, holding hands. "Do you really like it?" Tessa asked, as if his opinion was the most important thing in the world. "I really do." She smiled, relieved, and ran back to the living room. Silas stood there looking at the drawing on the fridge. My family. She had written my family. When was the last time someone had included him in a family? Even with Rebecca, they had never reached that point. It was always my apartment, my car, my life. Never our home, our life, our family. And here was a 5-year-old girl whom he had known for less than a week, already including him in her family. He went back to the living room and found Carmen tidying up the toys. "They are lovely children," she said, folding a small blanket. "Tessa is very responsible for her age, and Theo is a calm baby now that he's well fed." "How was the day?" Silas asked, sitting down in the armchair. "Very calm. Theo slept a lot this morning, ate well at lunchtime. Tessa helped change his diaper. She already knows how to do almost everything herself." Of course she knew. Tessa probably knew how to take care of babies better than most adults. "And she drew all day," Carmen continued. "She made several drawings for you. They're all on the kitchen table." Several drawings. Silas felt something strange in his chest. "She keeps asking what time you get home," Carmen smiled. "So I think she's excited to show you everything she did during the day. Excited to show him what she did, as if he were important to her." Carmen finished tidying up and said goodbye. Silas was left alone with the children for the first time since hiring the nanny. In the first few days, he always came home after Carmen had already left, avoiding being alone with them. But now, watching Tessa play with Theo on the rug, he no longer felt that initial panic. He still didn't really know what he was doing, but at least he didn't panic when Theo cried. "Silas!" Tessa looked at him. "Are you going to have dinner with us tonight?" The question caught him off guard. For the past few days, he had always eaten alone at the office after they had already had dinner. "You want me to have dinner with you?" "I do," she said simply. "Carmen made that soup you like. And there's bread too." Carmen made soup he likes. She had paid attention to what he ate, what he preferred. She had taken care of him too, not just the children. "All right then," Silas said. "I'll just change my clothes and be right back." He went up to his room, took off his suit, and put on casual clothes. When he came down, he found Tessa putting Theo in the high chair that Carmen had bought. The table was set for 3 people. 3 people. When was the last time he had dinner at a table set for 3 people? They ate dinner together, Tessa talking about everything that had happened during the day. Theo ate his baby food, getting his whole face dirty, but looking satisfied. The house was filled with sounds. Spoons clinking on plates, Tessa talking, Theo making noises. It wasn't the elegant silence Silas was used to. It was messy, a bit chaotic, unpredictable. It was life. After dinner, he helped bathe Theo. Or rather, he watched Tessa bathe her brother, ready to help if needed. The girl was careful. She knew exactly how to hold the baby, how to test the water temperature. "My mom taught me," she explained, as if she had read his thoughts. "She said I had to learn to take care of him in case she wasn't around." In case she wasn't around, as if she already knew she was going to leave. After the bath, Tessa put Theo to sleep, singing softly. Silas stood at the bedroom door, watching. The scene was so natural, so full of love, that he felt almost like an intruder. When Theo finally fell asleep, Tessa slowly left the room, closing the door carefully. "He'll sleep through the night now," she said, proud of her work. "You did very well." She smiled, satisfied. Then she hesitated, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. "Silas." "Yes. Do you like living with us?" The question was simple, direct, but loaded with meaning. Silas realized she was genuinely worried about the answer. "I do," he said, and realized it was true. "I like it very much." The smile she gave in response was the most beautiful he had ever seen. Later, after Tessa went to sleep, Silas went back to the kitchen and looked at the drawing on the fridge again. My family. 3 stick figures, holding hands. He carefully took the paper from the fridge, as if it was something precious. He couldn't throw it away. He couldn't even leave it there, where anyone visiting the house could see it. He went up to his office and opened his desk drawer. He placed the drawing there, among important documents and multi-million-dollar contracts. For some reason, it felt like the right place, the place where he kept the things that truly mattered. Silas woke up in the middle of the night to Theo crying. Again. It was the 3rd time that week. The baby had nightmares, or colic, or something Carmen had explained, but that he hadn't quite understood. The crying echoed through the house, and even with Carmen sleeping in the guest room, Silas was the one who woke up first. He got out of bed, put on a robe, and went to the children's room. Tessa was already up, trying to calm her brother. "Sorry," she whispered when she saw him at the door. "He's been like this since yesterday." "You don't need to apologize," Silas replied, but he felt the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. He stood there, watching Tessa rock Theo, humming softly. In a few minutes, the baby calmed down. When he finally went back to bed, it was almost 4 in the morning. The next morning, he arrived at the office with dark circles under his eyes and in a terrible mood. The meeting with the German clients was a disaster. He lost his train of thought twice, mixed up numbers, and had to apologize. "Are you okay?" asked Marcus, his partner, after the clients left. "I'm just tired." "Tired?" Marcus frowned. "Since when do you get tired? You used to work 18 hours a day without batting an eye." Since when indeed? Silas didn't know what to answer. Since he had 2 children at home waking up in the middle of the night, since his days revolved around bottle feedings and naps, since his perfect house turned into a place full of toys and a baby's cries. "I need to take care of a few things," he said, and left the room before Marcus could ask any more questions. Back in his office, he closed the door and stared out the window. Chicago stretched out below, bustling and impersonal. His life before the children seemed so simple from up there, predictable, organized. He picked up the phone and dialed the number he had saved in his contacts a week ago. Department of Social Services, Sharon speaking. "Hello, Sharon. This is Silas Martinez. We spoke last week about a situation with 2 children." "Ah, yes, Mr. Martinez. How can I help you?" Silas hesitated. On the other end of the line, Sharon waited patiently. "I was thinking that maybe it's better to find a stable home for them." The words came out more easily than he expected, but they left a bitter taste in his mouth. "I understand," Sharon said, without judgment in her voice. "It's a difficult decision. May I ask what made you change your mind?" Silas ran a hand through his hair. "I have no experience with children. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Maybe they deserve someone who knows how to take better care of them." "Mr. Martinez, may I ask a question? Are the children well cared for? Fed, clean, safe?" "They are." "And do they seem happy?" Silas thought of Tessa running to show him her drawings, of Theo trying to crawl after the red ball, of the noisy dinners at the kitchen table. "They do." "Then maybe you're taking better care of them than you think," Sharon said gently. But if you really want me to find a family for them, I can start the process. It will take a few weeks." "A few weeks?" "It's difficult to find families willing to adopt 2 siblings together. Most prefer babies or single children. I can try, but I can't guarantee they will stay together." The words hit Silas like a punch in the stomach. They wouldn't stay together. Tessa and Theo separated. He started, but stopped. "They need to stay together. I understand, and I'll do my best, but you need to know that the options are limited." Silas hung up, feeling worse than before he had called. He sat there, staring at the phone, trying to process the conversation. A few weeks. Maybe separated. The rest of the day passed in a fog. He tried to work, tried to focus on the numbers and reports, but he couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Sharon, He left the office earlier than usual and drove home without rushing. Part of him wanted to prolong the drive, to postpone the moment of arriving and seeing the children, knowing he might be planning to get rid of them. But when he parked in the garage and opened the front door, Tessa ran to him as she always did. "Silas! Silas!" She was holding a piece of paper in her hands, her eyes shining with excitement. "Ah, look what I made today." She held out another drawing. It was similar to the first one, 3 stick figures holding hands, but this time there was something different. In the middle of the largest figure's chest, she had drawn a red heart. "This is you," she pointed, proudly. "Tessa, but today I drew a heart, because Carmen said that good people have big hearts." Silas looked at the drawing, feeling something heavy form in his chest. "Tessa, and do you know why I did this?" she continued, not waiting for an answer. "Because today I dreamed that we were a family." The words echoed in the silent hallway. Tessa looked at him with those hope-filled brown eyes, holding the drawing as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Silas couldn't answer. The words were stuck in his throat, mixed with guilt and confusion. He took the drawing from her small hands, feeling the thin paper between his fingers. "Do you like it?" Tessa asked, suddenly uncertain. He nodded, still unable to speak. Tessa smiled and relieved, and ran back to the living room, where Theo was playing with Carmen. Silas stood in the hallway, looking at the drawing. The red heart in the middle of the figure seemed to pulse on the paper. "Today I dreamed that we were a family." He went up to his office and opened the drawer where he had kept the first drawing. He placed the new one next to the other, the 2 papers crumpled from the care with which she had made them. He sat in his chair and stared at the drawings. 2 children who had no one in the world, a girl who dreamed they were a family, a baby who was learning to crawl in his living room. And he thinking about sending them away because he was tired, because his life had been turned upside down, because he was afraid. Afraid of what? Of getting attached, of taking on a responsibility he didn't ask for, of discovering that maybe he wasn't as good at taking care of people as he was at taking care of business, or afraid of discovering that maybe he was good at it and that his entire life up to that point had been empty. He sat in silence for a long time, the drawings in front of him, the sounds of the house reaching him muffled through the closed door, Tessa talking to Theo, Carmen preparing dinner, life happening around him. Life that he had brought into his house, that had changed everything, that had turned his silent mansion into a home, and now he was thinking of throwing it all away because he was scared. The phone rang. It was Sharon, probably wanting to confirm the next steps, to start the process of finding a family for Tessa and Theo. Silas looked at the ringing phone, then at the drawings, then at the closed office door. He didn't answer. He wasn't ready to make that decision yet. He still didn't know if he could live with it. Sharon's call went unanswered for 3 days. On the 4th day, Silas deleted the number from his phone. It wasn't a conscious decision. There was no dramatic moment of revelation. Simply, when he saw her name in his contacts, he felt it no longer belonged there, as if it were a part of a life he was leaving behind. The change started small. On Monday, he came home at dinner time instead of hiding in his office. Carmen had made lasagna and Tessa was trying to teach Theo how to clap. "Silas," she shouted when she saw him. "Look at Theo. He can almost do it." Theo was sitting in his high chair, moving his little hands in an uncoordinated way. It wasn't quite clapping, but he was trying to imitate his sister. "Very good, Theo," Silas said, sitting down at the table, and he stayed. He had dinner with them, listened to Tessa talk about her day, helped clean Theo's messy face after his baby food. It wasn't as strange as he had expected. It was natural. On Tuesday, he did the same thing. On Wednesday, too. On Thursday, he came home and found the table already set for 3 tasks, as if Carmen knew he would stay. "Would you like me to prepare something special tomorrow?" she asked, arranging the plates. "Why?" "It's Friday. I thought you might want something different for the weekend." The weekend. Silas hadn't thought about that. Normally, Carmen didn't work on weekends. He would be alone with the children for 2 whole days. The idea should have terrified him. A few weeks ago, it would have. but now he just felt a strange curiosity. What would it be like to spend a whole weekend with Tessa and Theo? On Friday night, Carmen said goodbye and left detailed instructions about the children's routines, feeding times, nap times, bath times. Silas wrote it all down, but realized he already knew most of it. When had he learned that? When had he started paying attention to the schedules, the habits, the children's quirks? On Saturday morning, he woke up to Theo crying. But this time it wasn't a cry of desperation. It was the cry he was learning to recognize: hunger. Simple as that. He prepared the bottle, changed the diaper, put Theo in his crib while he woke Tessa up. Everything flowed naturally, without the panic of the first few days. "Good morning." Tessa appeared in the kitchen with messy hair, still in her pajamas. "Good morning. Want pancakes?" "You know how to make pancakes?" Silas hesitated. Actually, he didn't, but he had seen Carmen make them a few times. "Let's find out together." It was a disaster. The first batch burned. The second was raw in the middle. The third stuck to the pan. But Tessa laughed at every failed attempt, and even Theo seemed to find the chaos in the kitchen amusing. "I think we'll have to eat cereal," Silas said, looking at the mess. "That's okay," Tessa shrugged. "It was fun trying." Fun. When was the last time he had fun cooking? When was the last time he had fun, period? They spent the whole day together. They played in the backyard, watched cartoons on television, made a tent with sheets in the living room. Theo crawled all over the house, exploring every corner with curiosity. At night, after their bath, Silas helped put Theo in his crib. The baby was tired from the full day, yawning and rubbing his little eyes. "He'll fall asleep quickly today," Tessa said, arranging her brother's blanket. They stood there for a few minutes, watching Theo fall asleep. The baby's breathing became deeper, more regular. His little face relaxed, his hands opened. "He's growing," Silas murmured. "He is," Tessa agreed. Carmen said he'll start talking soon. Babies talk at 10 months and he's already 9. 9 months. Theo was 9 months old and was there, in Silas's house, growing, learning new things, as if this was his place. "Silas," Tessa said softly, so as not to wake her brother. "Yes?" "Did you ever want to have a family?" The question came out of nowhere, direct as her questions always were. Silas looked at her, then at the sleeping baby. "I did. Once." "And what happened?" Silas hesitated. He had never talked about Rebecca with anyone, let alone a child. But there was something in the way Tessa asked, without judgment, just genuine curiosity. "I was engaged," he began slowly. "We had plans, a house on the beach, 2 kids, a golden retriever, everything planned, everything perfect. But she cheated on me." The words came out more easily than he expected. "With my best friend, actually. I found out 3 weeks before the wedding." Tessa said nothing, just continued watching Theo sleep. "After that, I promised myself I would never get involved with anyone again. I promised that starting a family wasn't for me, that I would focus only on work, only on myself." Silas paused, took a deep breath. "Until I met you two. Until you met us. You made my hardened heart smile again." Tessa looked at him, her brown eyes serious in the dim light of the room. "Why did your heart harden?" "Because it hurts less that way," Silas admitted. "When you don't care about anyone, no one can hurt you. But no one can make you happy either." The observation was simple, childish on the surface, but carried a wisdom that caught Silas off guard. A 5-year-old girl had understood something it took him years to realize. "That's true," he said. "I think I had forgotten what it was like to be happy." Tessa moved slowly and rested her head on his shoulder. The gesture was natural, affectionate, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Then we can be your family if you want." The words came out in a whisper, but they echoed in the silent room like an invitation, a promise, a possibility he didn't even know he was looking for. Silas looked down at the dark head resting on his shoulder, then at the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib. 3 people who had barely known each other for a few weeks, but who had already changed his life completely. "I would like that very much," he finally said, his voice hoarse. Tessa smiled without lifting her head. Then we already are. Family isn't who you're born with, it's who chooses to stick together. Silas didn't know where she had heard that, whether it was from Carmen or some TV show, or if it was just the natural wisdom of a child who had learned too early what really mattered in life. But he knew she was right. They stayed there for a few more minutes, watching Theo sleep, feeling the weight and lightness of becoming a family, not officially, not on paper, but in all the ways that truly mattered. When they finally left the room, Silas felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time, more responsible and more free, more whole. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't alone. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of it. He had a family, small as unlikely, built from impossible circumstances and choices he didn't even know he was making. But it was his, and they were his, and that was more than enough. The meeting with the Samsung executives was going perfectly. Silas was presenting the last quarter's numbers, graphs climbing, optimistic projections. The export contract was practically sealed. Only a few details remained. Marcus smiled from the other side of the table, satisfied. It was the kind of deal they had been pursuing for months. Silas's cell phone vibrated. He quickly glanced at the screen. Carmen. She usually only called in emergencies. "Excuse me," he murmured, rejecting the call. "Where were we?" 2 minutes later, the phone vibrated again. Carmen again. Silas began to feel a pang of concern, but continued presenting. The Koreans were impressed with the data, asking technical questions that he answered automatically. A third call. This time he answered. "Hi, Carmen, I'm in a meeting." "Silas?" Her voice was rushed, almost a shout. "Theo has a high fever. I'm worried." The world stopped. "What do you mean, a high fever?" "It started an hour ago. It's already at 102 degrees and rising. He won't stop crying. He won't take his bottle. He's very hot." Silas jumped up from his chair so quickly he knocked over his glass of water. The presentation on the screen, the Korean executives, the multi-million-dollar contract, it all disappeared. "I'm on my way. Take him to the hospital. I'll meet you there." "Which hospital?" "The closest one. Northwestern Memorial. I'm heading straight there." He hung up and turned to his colleagues at the table, who were looking at him in confusion. "I have to go," he said, already grabbing his jacket. "Family emergency." "Silas, the meeting," Marcus began. "You finish it. Sign whatever needs to be signed." "But—" Silas was already at the door. He ran down the hallway, pressed the elevator button 3 times in a row. When the doors didn't open immediately, he ran down 10 flights of stairs. In the parking garage, he started the car with trembling hands. Traffic. Of course there was traffic, just when he needed to get home fast. He honked, cursed, changed lanes 5 times. He called Carmen on the way. "How is he?" "The fever is up to 104. Tessa is terrified. She wants to stay with him in the car. I'm leaving the house now." 104 degrees. Babies could have seizures from high fevers. They could suffer brain damage. They could... Silas stepped hard on the accelerator. He arrived home just as Carmen was putting Theo in her car. The baby was crying weakly, a different sound from his normal cry. He was red with fever, his little body limp in the nanny's arms. "My God," Silas whispered, touching the baby's forehead. It was burning. "Let's go in my car," he said, taking Theo in his arms. "It's faster." Tessa came running out, her face wet with tears. "Silas, Theo is really sick. He won't stop crying." "It's going to be okay," he said, trying to sound calm. "We're going to the hospital and the doctors will take care of him." He put Theo in the car seat, but the baby cried even louder with the movement. Tessa climbed in beside him, holding her brother's little hand. "Shh, Theo. Silas will take care of us." The trust in her voice made Silas's stomach churn. What if he couldn't take care of them? What if it was too late? What if... He drove to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. Carmen called the emergency room and told them they were on their way. Theo kept crying, each sound making Silas drive faster. "Please, don't let anything happen to him," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Northwestern Memorial was busy. Silas stopped the car at the emergency entrance, took Theo in his arms, and ran to the reception. Pediatric emergency, he told the nurse. Baby with a high fever. Name? Theo. Silas hesitated. What was Theo's last name? He had never asked. Theo Martinez. The words came out automatically. Theo Martinez, as if he were his son. The nurse filled out the form quickly and called a doctor. Dr. Patricia Chen, a pediatric specialist. She examined Theo right in the hallway, checked his temperature, listened to his heart. We're going to run some tests, she said calmly. It could be a simple viral infection, but with babies, we always prefer to be sure. Simple viral infection. The words should have reassured Silas, but he could only think about the could be. What else could it be? They took Theo to an examination room. Silas and Tessa waited in the white hallway. Carmen had gone to park the car and buy water. Is he going to be okay? Tessa asked, looking through the window of the room where the doctors were examining Theo. He will, Silas said, pulling her onto his lap. The doctors here are very good. Tessa rested her head on his shoulder, tired from crying. In a few minutes, she was asleep. The stress of the day had completely exhausted her. Silas sat there with Tessa sleeping on his lap, looking at the door of the examination room. The hospital noises echoed around them, beeping machines, low conversations of nurses, the cries of other children, and it was there, in that cold, white hallway, that he felt a fear he had never known before. It wasn't the fear of losing money or a deal or an opportunity. It was the fear of losing someone he loved, the fear that Theo wouldn't be okay, that something serious was happening to the baby who had become the center of his life without him even realizing it. When had it happened? When had Theo stopped being the child he was temporarily caring for and become his son, Joy? When had Tessa stopped being the girl who needed help and become his daughter? He looked down at Tessa's head sleeping on his shoulder. She trusted him completely. She believed he would fix everything, that he would take care of her and her brother. And he wanted that too. He wanted to be the person she thought he was. Dr. Chen came out of the room 40 minutes later. How is he? Silas asked, trying not to wake Tessa. It's a viral infection, as we suspected. Nothing serious, but we're going to give him a fever reducer and observe him for a few hours. The fever has already started to come down. Silas felt his legs weaken with relief. Can he go home today? If the fever continues to decrease, yes. But he will need special care for the next few days. Lots of fluids, medicine on schedule, constant observation, special care, constant observation. I can take care of him, he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The doctor smiled. I'm sure you can. You got here very quickly. You did everything right. It's obvious you are very caring parents. Parents. She had said parents. 3 hours later, Theo was well enough to go home. His fever had dropped to 99 degrees. He had drunk his whole bottle and had even tried to smile at Tessa. In the car, Silas called his office. Marcus, it's me. I won't be able to come back today. In fact, I'm not coming to work for the rest of the week. The rest of the week, Silas, we have the meeting with cancel it, or you handle it. I need to take care of my kids. Your kids. Yes, my kids. He hung up before Marcus could respond. At home, he settled Theo in his room with a humidifier that Carmen had bought at the pharmacy. He gave him medicine on schedule, checked his temperature every 2 hours, and didn't leave his side. Tessa helped with everything, bringing clean diapers, holding the bottle, singing softly to her brother. She was exhausted, but refused to sleep far from Theo. Can I sleep here on the floor? She asked at bedtime. You can sleep in my bed, Silas said. Son, it's big enough for both of us. That way I can keep an eye on Theo and on you. That night he slept with Tessa on one side and Theo's crib on the other. He woke up every hour to check if the baby was breathing well, if the fever hadn't returned. The 4th time he woke up, he found Tessa looking at him in the dark. You're not sleeping either, she whispered. I'm taking care of you. Mommy didn't do this when I got sick. The sentence caught Silas off guard. Tessa rarely talked about her mother, about her life before she met him on the street. She didn't. She would get nervous when we cried. She'd say she didn't know what to do. Silas felt a painful ache in his chest. Her mother who didn't know how to care for her sick children, a 5-year-old girl who had to deal with a feverish baby on her own. "Well, I know what to do," he said gently, "and I'm not leaving." Tessa smiled in the dark and closed her eyes again. Theo was completely better in 2 days, but Silas didn't go back to work. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel the urge to be at the office. He wanted to stay home, take care of the kids, enjoy these days together. On Thursday morning, he made pancakes for Tessa. This time, they didn't burn. "You're getting good at this," she said, eating a whole one. "I'm practicing." In the afternoon, they read stories in the living room. Tessa chose 3 different books, and Silas read them all with different voices for each character. Theo sat on the rug, playing with colorful blocks, laughing at the funny voices. "Read one more," Tessa pleaded when he finished the 3rd story. "We've read them all." "Then make one up." Make up a story. Silas had never done that in his life. But he looked at Tessa waiting, at Theo drooling on the red block, and began to speak. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived alone in a big house. The story came out naturally, about a man who thought he didn't need anyone until he found 2 children who changed his life. Tessa listened attentively, asking questions, suggesting changes to the plot. By the end of the week, the house was completely different. Carmen had bought a small stereo for the living room, and now there was always children's music playing. Tessa had scattered cushions on the living room floor to make a play area. The laundry line was full of tiny clothes, Theo's little t-shirts, Tessa's little dresses. Silas looked around one Friday night and didn't recognize his own house. Where there was once cold elegance and silence, there was now life, messiness, joy. "I never imagined it would be so good. Just being here with you," he murmured, watching Tessa teach Theo how to stack blocks. She looked at him and smiled. "It is good. It's like we've always lived here." That was exactly it, as if they had always been a family. That night, after putting the children to bed, Silas caught himself smiling in the bathroom mirror. Not a forced smile from meetings or social events, a genuine, spontaneous smile. He caught himself smiling without realizing it several times during the week. While making coffee, while reading emails, while watching Theo try to crawl after the neighbor's cat that had appeared in the yard. The cold, calculating businessman he had been for years was disappearing. In his place, someone he didn't even know existed was emerging. A father. A man who cared more about a baby's temperature than about multi-million-dollar contracts. And for the first time in his life, Silas was completely satisfied with who he was becoming. Silas woke up at 5:30 in the morning thinking about pancakes. He wasn't hungry. He hadn't woken up because of any noise. He simply opened his eyes, and the first thing that came to mind was, today is Saturday. Tessa likes pancakes on Saturdays. He got up slowly, trying not to make noise. In the hallway, he stopped in front of the children's room and listened. Theo was still asleep, his breathing deep and regular. Tessa too, probably hugging the teddy bear Carmen had bought the week before. It was amazing how well he already knew their sleeping habits. He knew that Theo always woke up at 6:15, crying softly until someone changed his diaper. He knew that Tessa was sleepy in the morning but became energetic after breakfast. He knew that on Saturdays she always asked if they could make pancakes together. In the kitchen, he began to gather the ingredients: flour, eggs, milk, sugar. He already knew the recipe by heart after making it so many times. 5 weeks ago, he couldn't even boil water properly. Now he was planning a special breakfast because he knew it made Tessa happy. When had that happened? When did his mornings stop starting with urgent emails and start with planning children's meals? He prepared the batter, heated the pan. While he waited, he picked up his phone to check his messages. He had 15 unread emails, 3 missed calls from Marcus, 2 messages from the office about a problem with suppliers. He glanced at everything quickly and put the phone away. Nothing that couldn't wait until Monday or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. When did work stop being the priority? When did he stop compulsively checking emails at 5 in the morning and start worrying more about not burning pancakes? The first batch came out perfect, golden, fluffy, just the way Tessa liked it. Silas smiled, satisfied. Carmen always said he was getting better in the kitchen. In fact, he was getting better at many things. He changed diapers without disgust, knew how to prepare a bottle at the right temperature, could calm Theo when he cried. "Silas?" Tessa's sleepy voice came from the stairs. "Are you making pancakes?" "I am. Good morning, princess." "Good morning," she ran down, still in her pajamas, hair messy. "Can I help?" "Of course." "You can flip the next one." Tessa climbed onto the stool that now permanently sat next to the stove. Silas guided her small hand to flip the pancake without getting burned. It was their ritual, something that had emerged naturally after a few weeks. "I did it," she shouted as the pancake landed perfectly in the pan. "Very good. You're becoming a chef." Theo woke up with the noise and started to whimper. Silas automatically went to get him, changed his diaper, and brought him to the kitchen. The baby sat in his high chair watching them cook, making his happy noises. "Theo, look!" Tessa showed him the pancake. "I made it!" The baby clapped his hands and laughed. In the last few days, he had started to really clap. Not just the uncoordinated movements from before. It was a small achievement, but one that filled Silas with pride as if it were the greatest victory in the world. "He's almost talking," Tessa said, giving a small piece of pancake to her brother. Carmen said it will be soon. "Yesterday he was making da-da-da sounds all afternoon." "What do you think his first word will be?" Silas asked, sitting at the table with them. "Tassay," Tessa said confidently, "which is my name," or Las, "which is yours." Silas smiled. In recent days, Theo had started making sounds that really seemed like syllables. "Fa-ma-ma-ma, ah-ho-da-da-da, ah-oh-ba-ba-ba." Carmen said it was normal that he was experimenting with his voice, but Silas paid attention to every sound, trying to identify the first real word. He wanted to be there when it happened. He wanted to be the first person to hear Theo speak. He had even left some meetings early last week because Carmen said the baby was almost there. When did it become so important for him to be present for all the children's important moments? When did missing a first word start to seem more crucial than closing a $2 million deal? After breakfast, Tessa ran to her room to get her new drawings. She had made 3 the day before while Silas was working in his home office. It was another one of their rituals. She would save the day's drawings to show him when he got home. "This one is our house," she showed the first one. "Look, it has windows, a door, a chimney, and this garden with flowers that Carmen planted." It was a typical child's drawing. A square house, a triangular roof, a yellow sun in the corner. But she had drawn 3 figures in front of the house, holding hands, their family. And this one is us at the park. The second drawing showed stick figures on a seesaw. "Silas said you were going to take us to the park today." Had he said that? Silas tried to remember. "Oh, yes. On Thursday, when Tessa asked if she could play outside, and he said that on Saturday he would take her and Theo to the park. A casual promise he didn't even remember making. It was funny how she remembered every promise, every comment, every plan he made, as if his every word was too important to forget. And this one is special. Tessa held the third drawing as if it was something precious. It's Theo saying his first word. Silas looked closer. It was Theo sitting on the floor, with a speech bubble coming out of his mouth. Inside the bubble, she had written "Daddy" in crooked but neat letters. "Do you think his first word will be Daddy?" he asked, feeling something strange in his chest. "I think so. Because you take care of us like a daddy does." "Even better. Even better." The phrase caught Silas off guard. Better than who? What father was she using as a comparison? The one she never had, or one she knew who didn't take good care of his children? "So what do you mean better, Tessa? You always come when we call, you make yummy food, you read stories, you stay when we're sick." She counted on her fingers. "Real daddies do that. Real daddies." When had he started acting like a father without realizing it? When did he stop seeing himself as someone temporarily taking care of 2 children and start seeing himself as a father? The phone rang. Marcus. "Excuse me," Silas said to Tessa. "It's work." "Silas, where are you? We have the presentation for the board on Monday, remember? And the problem with the Chinese suppliers is turning into a crisis." "I remember the presentation. And about the suppliers, can't you handle it?" Me? Silas, you're the one who always deals with them. You speak Mandarin, you know their culture. I can make a call on Monday. A call? They're threatening to break the contract. We need to go to Shanghai this week. Silas looked at Tessa, who was showing the drawings to Theo, and at Theo, who was trying to grab the paper with his little hands. The idea of traveling to Shanghai, of spending a week away from them, seemed impossible. Marcus, can I call you back later? We're in the middle of breakfast. Breakfast? It's 9:30 in the morning. Yep, special Saturday breakfast. Silas, what is happening to you? You used to be a workaholic. And now it seems like you don't even care about the company anymore. It's not that I don't care, it's just... Silas paused, trying to find the right words. It's just that I have other priorities now. He hung up before Marcus could respond. Other priorities. Special Saturday breakfast. When had he developed family traditions? When had Saturday morning become sacred? Because it was his time with the children. Who was that? Tessa asked. Marcus. From work. He wants me to travel to China this week. Are you going? Her question was loaded with concern. Silas realized she was afraid he would leave, afraid of being abandoned again. I'm not going, he said without hesitation. I don't want to travel. I want to stay here with you. The relief on her face was immediate. Good. I don't like it when you travel. The house gets too quiet. The house gets too quiet. Of course it did, because now he was an essential part of their routine. His presence or absence completely changed the dynamic of the house. Marcus wasn't angry, exactly. He was confused, and Silas understood. 5 weeks ago, he was completely dedicated to work. He would cancel any personal commitment for an important meeting. Now, he was refusing international trips because he wanted to stay home and make pancakes. Why don't you want to travel? Tessa asked, curious. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that his priorities had completely changed, that he now cared more about her drawings than about multi-million-dollar contracts? Because you two are more important than any trip, he finally said. More important than work. Much more important. It was true. He had realized this clearly the previous week, when he was in an important virtual meeting and found himself wondering if Theo had eaten all his lunch, or when he was reviewing urgent contracts and stopped to text Carmen to ask how the afternoon nap had gone. His days no longer revolved around meeting schedules. They revolved around the children's schedules. 6 o'clock bottle, 3 o'clock snack, 7 o'clock bath. His mental agenda was filled with childhood milestones, when Theo would start talking, when Tessa would learn to read, whether they should enroll her in preschool. It's good that you think about us, Tessa said, smiling. I think about you too. When I'm playing, I wait for you to come home from work. Carmen always asks what time you're coming. She waited for him to arrive. A 5-year-old girl organized her day around his return home, and Carmen paid attention to this. She knew about her anticipation. You are the best part of my day, Silas said, and realized he had never said anything so true in his life. Are the part I look forward to the most. They spent the morning at the park, as promised. Tessa went to the slide while Silas sat on a bench with Theo on his lap. The baby watched the other children play, fascinated by the movement and voices. Ba ba ba, Theo said, pointing to a ball a girl was playing with. Ball, Silas said slowly, articulating clearly. Pale, Becky, almost there, champ. You'll get it. A woman sat on the bench next to him with a child Tessa's age. Your children are beautiful, she said, smiling. How old are they? She's 5. He's 10 months, Silas replied automatically. Thank you. The age difference is the same as mine. It's a lot of work, but they adore each other. After she left, Silas thought about the conversation. Your children. She had naturally assumed that Theo and Tessa were his children. And not only did he not correct her, but he answered their ages as if it were the most natural thing in the world, because it didn't feel strange. It felt right. In the afternoon, after lunch, Tessa made more drawings while Theo napped in his stroller. Silas tried to work a little on his laptop, but found himself stopping every 5 minutes to see what she was drawing. This is you at the office, she showed him, and this is us at home waiting for you to come back. Look, I drew a clock showing 6 o'clock, which is when you arrive. Him at the office, them at home waiting until 6 o'clock. That's exactly how it worked now. He would go to work thinking of them, keeping an eye on the time so as not to be late. They stayed at home with a routine that culminated in his return. "Tessa," he said, closing the laptop completely. "Can I talk to you about something?" "You can." She dropped her crayons and gave him her full attention, as she always did when he wanted to have a serious talk. It was impressive how a 5-year-old could be so focused when needed. "The truth is, I can't live without you guys anymore." The words came out naturally, unplanned. But the moment he said them, he knew it was the purest truth he had ever spoken in his life. "I can't live without you either," Tessa replied simply. "You're our family now. Our real family. Our real family, not as if, not sort of. It was family, period. In the words of a 5-year-old, without complications or reservations. "I want it to be official," Silas said. "I want you to be my real children, on paper too." "What do you mean?" "Adoption. It's a legal process where you and Theo officially become my children, with a new birth certificate, everything. My name as your father." Tessa's eyes shone with an intensity he had never seen before. "Can we have your last name?" "You can." "Tessa Martinez and Theo Martinez." She tested the sound of the name in her mouth, repeating it several times. "Tessa Martinez, Theo Martinez. I like it a lot. It really sounds like family, doesn't it?" "It sounds perfect." On Monday morning, Silas called his lawyer before he even got to the office. He was walking down the street, drinking coffee, when he dialed the number. "Robert, this is Silas Martinez. I need to talk to you about an adoption process." "Adoption? You didn't tell me you were dating someone seriously." "I'm not. It's 2 children I've been taking care of for a few weeks. I want to legally adopt them." "I see. It's a complex process, but possible. Do you want to schedule a meeting to discuss the details?" "I do, as soon as possible. Today, if possible." "You seem very decided. I can see you today at 3 in the afternoon." "Perfect." When he hung up, Marcus was waiting for him at the company's reception with a sour look on his face. "We need to talk now." "Go ahead. What's going on with you?" "You're not the same anymore. You come in late, leave early, can't focus in meetings, refuse trips." "I'm focusing on what really matters. The company matters. We built this together. You're throwing it all away for 2 kids you've known for a month." Silas looked out the office window. Down below, Chicago continued its frantic pace. People rushing, cars honking, everyone in a hurry to get somewhere. A hurry to make more money, close more deals, climb more rungs on the ladder of success. 5 weeks ago, he was one of those people, always running, always in a hurry, always focused on the next deal, the next contract, the next million. Now his hurry was different. He wanted to finish his workday quickly to get home in time for dinner. He wanted to be there when Theo said his first word. He wanted to help Tessa with her drawings. He wanted to be part of their routine, their lives. "Marcus," he said, turning to his partner, "it just doesn't make sense to live without them anymore." "Without who?" "My children, Tessa and Theo." "Silas, you've known them for 5 weeks." 5 weeks. And they've been the 5 most important weeks of my life. The only 5 weeks where I truly understood what it means to have a reason to live. Marcus shook his head, exasperated. "You can't make decisions based on emotion. This isn't how you've always worked. You've always been rational, calculating. Maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe I've worked my whole life the wrong way. Maybe I've wasted 30 years focusing on the wrong things." Marcus left, slamming the door. Silas didn't care. He knew that eventually his partner would understand, or he wouldn't, but it wouldn't change anything. In the afternoon, at the meeting with Robert, Silas explained the whole situation. The lawyer asked detailed questions, took notes, explained each step of the process. "It will take a few months," Robert said. "We need to verify that the children really have no other relatives, conduct psychological evaluations, home visits, hearings." "How long exactly?" "Between 6 months and a year, depending on the circumstances, and it will be expensive. We're talking about at least $50,000. $50,000. Silas spent more than that on wine per year. Money is not an issue. "Are you sure about this decision?" Robert asked, leaning forward. Adoption is irreversible. Once the process is finalized, you will be legally responsible for these children until they turn 18. Education, health, everything. 18 years. Tessa was 5. Theo was 10 months. He would be responsible for them for the next 17 years. 17 years of parent-teacher conferences, childhood illnesses, adolescence, college. The idea should have scared him. A few months ago, it would have. Now, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. "Those two, it's the most certain decision I've ever made in my entire life," he said without a second's hesitation. And it was true. More certain than starting the company, more certain than buying the mansion, more certain than any investment he had ever made, any deal he had ever closed. Because for the first time, he wasn't making a decision based on logic or financial benefit. He was making a decision based on love. And love, Silas was discovering, was the only thing that really made sense in the end. The phone call came on a Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. "Mr. Martinez." Robert's voice was different, more excited than usual. "I have good news. The paperwork has been approved. The adoption can be finalized next week." Silas stopped what he was doing immediately. He was reviewing a contract, but the words on the screen lost all meaning. "Next week?" "Tuesday, at 10 in the morning. The judge will sign the final documents. The children will need to be present. But it's just a formality. Everything has already been approved." 8 months. 8 months of paperwork, interviews, home visits, psychological evaluations. 8 months waiting for someone to decide if he was fit to be the father of the children he had already considered his own for so long. And now it was ending. "Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for everything. Congratulations, Silas. You're going to be an excellent father." When he hung up, Silas stood in his office for a few minutes, processing the news. Tuesday. In 5 days, Tessa and Theo would officially be his children. He arrived home earlier than usual. Carmen was in the kitchen preparing the afternoon snack. Theo was crawling on the floor chasing a little blue truck. Tessa was drawing at the table. "You're home early today," Carmen commented, smiling. "I have important news." Tessa looked at him, always attentive when he spoke seriously. "What news?" Silas crouched down to be at her level. Theo crawled over to him and propped himself up on his pant leg, trying to stand. "The adoption was approved. On Tuesday, you will officially be my children." Tessa dropped her crayon and her eyes widened. "For real? For real? Tuesday morning, we'll go to the courthouse, the judge will sign some papers, and that's it. You'll have my last name, a new birth certificate, everything." "Tessa Martinez and Theo Martinez," she said softly, testing the names again. "Exactly." Carmen smiled, moved. Over the last few months, she had become more than a nanny. She was part of the family too, the grandmother the children never had. "This is wonderful," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll make a special cake for Tuesday." In the following days, Silas found himself nervous in a way he couldn't explain. There was no doubt about the decision, no regret. But the officialization seemed to make everything more real, more definitive. On Monday night, after putting Theo to bed, he found Tessa in the living room flipping through a storybook. "Tessa," he called softly. "Hi. Can I sit with you?" She made room on the sofa. Silas sat down beside her, but soon realized he wanted to do this the right way. He stood up and knelt on the floor in front of her. Tessa was surprised by the formality of the gesture. "Silas, I wanted to ask you an important question," he began, feeling his heart beat faster. "Tomorrow, when we go to the courthouse, it will be official. But before that, I need to know." He paused, took a deep breath. For months, other people had decided if he could be a father. Social workers, psychologists, judges. But the only opinion that really mattered was hers. "Will you let me be your father?" The question came out simply, directly. But it carried months of insecurity, of hope, of a love he was still learning to express. Tessa looked at him for a long moment, her brown eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You already are my father," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "But I want to be sure it's what you want, that it's not just because you have no other choice." The tears began to stream down her face. Tessa leaned forward and hugged his neck tightly. "You changed my life," she whispered in his ear. "I thought family wasn't for me, but now I can't see myself without you." Silas felt his own eyes welling up with tears. He hugged her back tightly, as if he wanted to protect her from everything that had happened before he appeared in her life. "I can't see myself without you either," he murmured. They stayed embraced for a while, without saying anything. It was the most important moment of his life, more significant than any contract he had ever signed, any deal he had ever closed. "Tomorrow we're going to be a real family on paper too," Tessa said when they separated. "We are already a real family. The paper is just to make it official." On Tuesday morning, they dressed with care. Silas put on a suit. Tessa wore the blue dress Carmen had bought especially for the occasion. And Theo wore a tiny formal outfit that made him look like a baby executive. The courthouse was an imposing building in downtown Chicago. Walking up the stairs with the two children felt like a historic moment, as if they were entering a new phase of their lives. The hearing was quick and formal. The judge, an older man with gray hair, reviewed the documents, asked a few routine questions, and signed the papers. "Congratulations, Mr. Martinez," he said, handing over the new birth certificates. "It is now official. Tessa Martinez and Theo Martinez are legally your children." Silas looked at the certificates. Father's name, Silas Edward Martinez. Mother's name, left blank. Children, Tessa Sofia Martinez, age 5. Theo Gabriel Martinez, age 11 months. It was real. It was written on paper, stamped official. They were a family. On the way out of the courthouse, Carmen was waiting for them with a camera. She took several photos on the building's steps, Silas holding the certificates, Tessa hugging him, Theo in his arms making a face at the camera. "First official photo of the Martinez family," Carmen said, moved. At home, she had prepared a small but elaborate party. A chocolate cake with Martinez family, written in blue icing, balloons, soft music playing on the stereo. "You didn't have to do all this," Silas said, but he was visibly emotional. "Of course I did. It's a special day." They ate cake in the living room, Tessa telling Theo about what had happened at the courthouse, even though she knew he didn't understand. The baby was more interested in spreading icing on his high chair, but seemed happy with the festivities. The music played softly, nothing too lively. It was an intimate family celebration, true joy without ostentation. "How can I call Marcus and tell him?" Tessa asked after the cake. "You can," Silas said, laughing. In the last few months, Marcus had gotten used to his changes and had even developed an affection for the children. While Tessa was talking on the phone, Silas observed the scene. Theo had managed to crawl to the sofa and was trying to climb up. In the last few days, he had become more adventurous, exploring every corner of the house. "Da da da," Theo said, looking at him. "Hey, champ," Silas replied automatically. "Da da." Something about the way he said it made Silas pay more attention. It wasn't the random da 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 as usual. It was more focused, directed. "Tessa," he called. "Come here." She hung up the phone and came over. "What is it?" "Listen to Theo." They watched. Theo looked directly at Silas and said clearly, "Dada." Tessa screamed with excitement. "He said it. He said daddy." "Well, almost daddy." Carmen came running from the kitchen. "What happened?" "Theo said his first word," Tessa explained. "He said, Dada," looking at Silas. The first word, on the day of the adoption. Silas felt the timing couldn't have been more perfect. "Say it again, Theo," Tessa pleaded. "Say, Dada." "Dada," Theo repeated, clapping his hands. It was official in every possible way now, on paper and in the heart. That night, after all the day's excitement, the house was calmer. Carmen had gone home. The cake was put away. The balloons still decorated the living room. Silas was bathing Theo when he heard Tessa singing in her room. It was a melody he didn't know, sweet and soft. "Sleep, my little brother, sleep in peace. Tomorrow there's more play, tomorrow there's more." He finished the bath quickly and went to watch. Tessa was sitting on her bed, still in her blue dress, singing to her teddy bear as if it were Theo sleeping. "What's that song?" he asked softly. "I made it up," she said. "It's for when he can't sleep. It always works." "It's beautiful. Mommy used to sing to us, but I forgot her song, so I made up a new one." Silas put Theo in his crib. The baby was tired from the full day and fell asleep almost immediately. Tessa continued to hum softly, more to herself than to anyone else. He sat in the armchair in the room and watched them both. Theo sleeping peacefully, his breathing deep and regular. Tessa getting ready for bed but still singing her invented song. His children. Officially, legally, his children. "I didn't know being a father was what was missing in my life," he murmured, more to himself. Tessa heard him. "I didn't know having a father was what was missing in mine either," she said, smiling. "But now it makes sense. Everything makes sense." She was right. Everything made sense now. The noisy house, the Saturday pancakes, the missed meetings, the changed priorities. Everything. Silas looked around the room. Theo's crib, Tessa's bed, toys scattered about, little clothes in the dresser. It wasn't a perfect room. It was always a bit messy, always with something out of place. They weren't a perfect family. Tessa still woke up sometimes with nightmares about her mother. Theo still cried when he was teething. Silas still felt lost in some situations, still learning to be a father day by day. But they were real, they were true, they were his, and he was theirs. And finally, they were a family, officially, legally, and most importantly, in the heart. The Martinez family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.